The bitter winter wind whipped through Willoughby, Colorado as Willow Davies clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid December air of 1878. She had not expected the journey to her uncle's ranch to be easy, but the sudden snowstorm that had swept across the territory had made the final miles treacherous. The temperature had plummeted overnight, leaving patches of ice across the narrow trail that wound through the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Willow guided her mare, Penny, carefully along the path, the animal's hooves crunching through the fresh snow. At 22, she was making this journey alone, leaving behind the comforts of St. Louis where she had grown up. After her parents passing from influenza the previous spring, the city that had once been filled with fond memories now only reminded her of what she had lost. "Just a few more miles, girl," she whispered to Penny, patting the chestnut mare's neck. "Uncle Thomas said his ranch is just beyond that ridge." The wind howled through the pines, causing Willow to shiver despite her heavy woolen coat. Her fingers were numb inside her leather gloves, and her cheeks stung from the cold. She had never experienced such brutal weather, having spent most of her life in the relative comfort of the city. As they rounded a bend in the trail, Penny suddenly tensed beneath her. Willow leaned forward, concerned. "What is it, girl?" she murmured, trying to calm the nervous mare. Without warning, Penny's front hoof struck a patch of ice concealed beneath the fresh powder. The mare whinnied in panic as her legs splayed outward, unable to find purchase on the slick surface. Willow felt the world tilt as the horse lost its balance, threatening to throw her from the saddle. "Whoa!" she cried out, desperately clutching the reins, but Penny was already falling sideways, her terror evident in her rolling eyes. Just as Willow prepared for the inevitable crash into the hard, frozen ground, a figure appeared from the trees, moving with remarkable speed. A man on horseback charged toward them, and before Willow could process what was happening, he had dismounted in one fluid motion and caught Penny's bridle with strong hands, steadying the panicked animal. "It's over, you're all right," the stranger said in a deep, reassuring voice, looking up at Willow while maintaining his firm grip on the bridle. "Easy now, easy." Willow's heart hammered in her chest as she regained her balance in the saddle. The mare calmed under the stranger's touch, her breathing slowing as he stroked her muzzle gently. "Thank you," Willow managed to say through chattering teeth. "I thought we were both going down." The man nodded, his eyes a striking blue meeting hers. "These trails get treacherous when the temperature drops. Your horse did well to keep upright at all." Now that the immediate danger had passed, Willow took in the appearance of her rescuer. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair peeking out from beneath a well-worn Stetson. His face was weathered from the elements, suggesting years spent in the harsh western climate, but he couldn't have been more than 30 years old. A thick beard covered his jaw, providing some protection from the biting cold. "I'm Isaac Emerson," he said, still holding Penny's bridle as he helped guide the horse to more stable footing. "Most folks around here call me Ike." "Willow Davies," she replied, her breathing still uneven from the scare. "I'm headed to my uncle's ranch, Thomas Davies. Do you know him?" A look of recognition crossed Isaac's face. "Tom Davies? Sure do. His place is about 3 miles north of here." He glanced at the darkening sky. "But you won't make it before nightfall, not in this weather. My cabin's just over that rise. You'd best come with me until this storm passes." Willow hesitated, her city upbringing making her wary of following a strange man to his home. But the wind was picking up, driving sharp needles of snow against her face, and Penny was still trembling beneath her. Isaac seemed to understand her apprehension. "I've known your uncle for years, Miss Davies. He'd have my hide if I let his niece freeze to death when I could have helped." He offered a reassuring smile. "I promise you'll be safe." Something in his steady gaze convinced her. Willow nodded, adjusting her grip on the reins as Isaac released the bridle and returned to his own horse, a sturdy black gelding. "Follow me closely," he instructed, mounting in one smooth motion. "And watch for ice." They proceeded slowly through the worsening storm, Isaac frequently looking back to ensure she was managing the difficult terrain. After about 15 minutes of careful riding, a small log cabin came into view, smoke curling from its stone chimney. "Here we are," Isaac called over his shoulder. "Nothing fancy, but it's warm." He helped Willow dismount, her legs stiff from the cold and the tension of the near accident. While she stretched her numbing limbs, Isaac led both horses to a small stable attached to the cabin. "Let me get them settled," he said. "Go on inside and warm yourself by the fire." Doors unlocked. Willow pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped into the cabin. It was indeed warm, thanks to a hearty fire crackling in the stone hearth. The interior was simple but tidy, a far cry from her parents' elegant home in St. Louis, but welcoming in its own rustic way. A single room served as both kitchen and living area, with a curtained-off section she presumed was his sleeping quarters. Rough-hewn furniture, handmade but sturdy, was arranged around the fireplace. Books lined a small shelf more than she would have expected in a cowboy's cabin, and a rifle hung above the door. Willow moved closer to the fire, removing her gloves to warm her hands. The heat was heavenly against her frozen fingers, and she closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the sensation of feeling returning to her extremities. The door opened again, bringing with it a gust of cold air and the sound of boots stomping snow onto the wooden floor. "Horses are fed and watered," Isaac announced, removing his hat and coat. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he hung his outerwear on a peg by the door. "They'll be fine until morning." "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Emerson," Willow said, turning to face him. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along when you did." Isaac waved off her thanks. "Just Ike is fine, and anyone would have done the same." He moved to the small kitchen area. "You must be hungry. I was about to fix some stew before I went out to check my traps." "Not much, but it's hot." Willow hadn't realized how hungry she was until he mentioned food. "That sounds wonderful. May I help?" Isaac looked surprised at the offer but nodded. "Sure. Potatoes need peeling if you're willing." They worked side by side in comfortable silence, Willow peeling potatoes while Isaac prepared the rest of the simple meal. She watched him from the corner of her eye, noting the efficiency of his movements. His hands were calloused but moved with unexpected gentleness as he chopped vegetables. "Have you lived in Willoughby long?" she asked, breaking the silence. Isaac added the potatoes to the pot. "Going on 5 years now. Came west after the war, needed open spaces after all that." He stirred the contents of the pot, not meeting her eyes. "Your uncle was one of the first people I met when I arrived. Good man. He gave me work when others weren't so welcoming to a former Union soldier in these parts." Willow nodded. "He wrote that he could use help on the ranch. After my parents passed, there was nothing keeping me in St. Louis." "I'm sorry about your folks," Isaac said quietly, genuine sympathy in his voice. "Losing family is never easy." "No, it isn't," she agreed, surprised at how easily she could talk to this stranger about her loss. "But I'm hoping for a fresh start here." As they ate the hearty stew, seated at the small table near the fire, Isaac told Willow about Willoughby and the surrounding area. It was a small settlement, primarily ranchers and a few shopkeepers, but it was growing as more people moved west. "Your uncle's one of the most respected men in these parts," Isaac said. "His ranch is doing well, better than most. You'll be comfortable there." "And what about you?" Willow asked. "You live out here alone?" Isaac nodded. "I trap in the winter, Help your uncle and other ranchers when they need an extra hand. Break horses sometimes." He shrugged. "It suits me." There was something in his tone that suggested there was more to the story, but Willow didn't press. They had only just met, after all, and everyone in this new world had their secrets and their reasons for being here. As night fell completely, the wind howled around the cabin, rattling the windows. The storm had intensified, driving snow against the glass panes with increasing fury. "You'll have to stay the night," Isaac said, looking concerned as he peered out the window. "Can't risk the trails in this, especially not in the dark." Willow felt a flutter of nervousness but pushed it aside. Isaac Emerson had been nothing but respectful and kind since their meeting, and the alternative braving the blizzard was far more dangerous. "I appreciate your hospitality," she said formally. "I wouldn't want to impose—" "No imposition," he interrupted. "You can take the bed. I'll sleep by the fire." Despite her protests, Isaac was firm on this point. He provided her with one of his clean shirts to sleep in and showed her to the curtained-off area where a simple but neat bed stood. "If you need anything, I'm right out here," he said, already arranging blankets on the floor near the hearth. Alone behind the curtain, Willow changed quickly in the cold air, grateful for the thick woolen socks Isaac had lent her to keep her feet warm. His shirt was enormously large on her frame, reaching almost to her knees. She climbed into the bed, pulling the heavy quilt up to her chin. The bed smelled of pine and something uniquely masculine that she assumed was Isaac's scent. It was not unpleasant. In fact, there was something comforting about it as she listened to the storm raging outside and Isaac's quiet movements as he settled by the fire. "Good night, Miss Davies," came his voice from the other side of the curtain. "Good night, Ike," she replied, surprised at how natural his nickname felt on her lips. "And thank you again." As she drifted to sleep, the last thing Willow remembered was the sound of the fire crackling and the wind singing its winter song against the cabin walls. Morning arrived with a stillness that could only mean the storm had passed. Willow woke to the smell of coffee and the quiet sounds of movement in the cabin. She dressed quickly in her own clothes, which had been left to dry near the fire, and emerged from behind the curtain to find Isaac at the stove, cooking something that smelled delicious. "Good morning," he said, glancing up at her. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected, given the circumstances," Willow admitted. "The storm seems to have stopped." Isaac nodded. "Clear skies today. We should be able to get you to your uncle's before noon." He slid a plate of eggs and bacon toward her. "Eat up. It's a cold ride." They ate breakfast together, discussing the route they would take to the Davies ranch. Isaac was familiar with every trail and creek in the area, and Willow found herself grateful for his guidance. After breakfast, they prepared for departure. Isaac saddled both horses while Willow packed her few belongings. When she stepped outside, the world had been transformed. A thick blanket of pristine snow covered everything, sparkling in the morning sun. The air was crisp and clean, and her breath formed clouds in front of her. "It's beautiful," she murmured, taking in the winter landscape. "It can be," Isaac agreed, standing beside her, "when it's not trying to kill you." But there was a smile in his voice as he said it. The ride to her uncle's ranch took almost 2 hours, with Isaac leading the way along safe paths, avoiding areas where ice might lurk beneath the snow. They talked as they rode, and Willow found herself telling him more about her life in St. Louis, her father's business as a merchant, her mother's love of music, the society events she had attended but never quite enjoyed. In return, Isaac shared snippets of his own life growing up on a small farm in Pennsylvania, joining the Union Army at 18, his journey west after the war ended. He spoke little of the conflict itself, and Willow didn't press him on it. The shadows that crossed his face when he mentioned those years told her enough. As they crested a hill, a sprawling ranch came into view in the valley below. Several buildings clustered around a main house, with corrals and a barn nearby. Smoke rose from the chimney of the house, and even from a distance, Willow could see figures moving about, tending to the morning chores. "That's it," Isaac said, pointing. "Davies Ranch." Willow felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation as they approached. This was to be her new home, so different from the city life she had known. But something about the rugged beauty of the landscape and the honest simplicity of the life it promised appealed to her in a way she hadn't expected. As they rode into the yard, a man emerged from the barn, tall and broad-shouldered like Isaac, but with gray streaking his beard. His weathered face broke into a wide smile as he recognized Willow. "There she is," he called out. "Was beginning to worry, with that storm last night." Uncle Thomas strode forward as Isaac helped Willow dismount. She found herself wrapped in a bear hug, the familiar scent of tobacco and leather bringing back memories of her uncle's infrequent visits to St. Louis over the years. "Uncle Thomas," she said warmly as he released her. "It's so good to see you." "Look at you," he said, holding her at arm's length. "Spitting image of your mother." His eyes grew sad for a moment before he turned to Isaac. "And I see you've met our resident lone wolf." Isaac touched the brim of his hat. "Found her on the trail yesterday just before the storm hit. Her horse nearly took a bad spill on some ice." Thomas's expression grew serious. "Is that so? Well, I'm grateful you were there, Ike." He clapped the younger man on the shoulder. "Stay for dinner? Mary's making her famous stew, and we've got plenty to celebrate now that Willow's here." Isaac hesitated, glancing at Willow. She found herself hoping he would accept. "I should check my traps," he said slowly. "But I suppose they can wait until tomorrow." Thomas looked pleased. "Excellent. Come on in, both of you. Let's get you warmed up, Willow, and you can tell me all about your journey." The Davies home was larger than Isaac's cabin but carried the same rustic charm, with added touches that spoke of a woman's influence: curtains at the windows, a colorful quilt on the back of a rocking chair, dried flowers arranged in a vase on the mantel. Mary Davies, Thomas's wife of 15 years, welcomed Willow with open arms. A kind-faced woman in her 40s, she fussed over Willow's cold hands and insisted she sit by the fire while she prepared hot tea. "We've been looking forward to your arrival," Mary said, handing Willow a steaming cup. "Thomas has talked of nothing else for weeks." Willow smiled, already warming to her aunt by marriage. "I'm grateful for your welcome. I wasn't sure what to expect." "Well, it's not St. Louis," Thomas said, settling into his chair. "But we aim to make you comfortable here." "I've shown her to her room," Mary added. "It's small, but I thought you might like to make it your own. We can go into town next week for fabric if you want to sew new curtains or such." The conversation flowed easily through the afternoon and into dinner, with Thomas asking about Willow's journey and telling her about the ranch, the 50 head of cattle they maintained, the horses they were breeding, the small vegetable garden Mary tended in the warmer months. Isaac said little during the meal, but Willow noticed how her uncle included him in the conversation, asking his opinion on matters related to the ranch and the town. It was clear there was respect between the two men. As night fell and the lamps were lit, Thomas brought out a bottle of whiskey, pouring small glasses for himself and Isaac, and offering one to Willow, which she politely declined. "To new beginnings," Thomas said, raising his glass toward his niece. "And to family." They all drank to that, and when Isaac rose to leave, Willow felt an unexpected twinge of disappointment. "Thank you again for your help yesterday," she said as he collected his hat. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Isaac's blue eyes met hers. "I'm glad I was there." He hesitated, then added, "Perhaps I'll see you in town sometime." "I'd like that," Willow replied, surprised at her own boldness. After Isaac left, Willow helped Mary clean up from dinner while Thomas smoked his pipe by the fire. As they worked side by side, Mary spoke quietly. "Ike's a good man," she said, her tone casual but her eyes watchful. "Keeps to himself mostly, but there's not a more honest soul in these parts." Willow concentrated on drying the plate in her hands. "He was very kind to help me." Mary smiled knowingly but said nothing more. That night, as Willow lay in her new bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, her thoughts drifted to Isaac Emerson, his steady hands as he caught Penny's bridle, his quiet confidence as he navigated the snowy trails, the shadows that sometimes crossed his face when the conversation turned to the past. "It's over, you're all right," he had said. Simple words, but spoken with such reassurance that she had believed him instantly. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Willow adjusted to life on the ranch. There was always work to be done, helping Mary with household chores, learning to cook on the wood stove, assisting with the mending of clothes and linens. Thomas began teaching her to ride properly, not side saddle as she had in the city, but astride like the Western women did. "Can't work cattle riding side saddle," he explained when she expressed concern about the propriety. "Out here, practicality trumps city notions." She found she enjoyed the freedom of riding this way, especially once she became more confident. Penny seemed happier too, responding well to Willow's improving skills. Isaac visited the ranch occasionally during those weeks, usually to discuss business with Thomas or to help with some of the heavier work. Each time, Willow found herself looking forward to seeing him, though their interactions remained polite and somewhat formal. It was nearly a month after her arrival when Thomas announced they would be going into town for supplies. Willoughby was a small settlement compared to St. Louis, but it had the essential businesses: a general store, a blacksmith, a small hotel with a dining room, and, of course, a saloon. "We'll make a day of it," Mary said excitedly as they prepared for the journey. "It'll do you good to meet some of the townspeople, Willow." The ride into town took just over an hour. Willow wore her best remaining dress, a deep green wool that brought out the amber flecks in her hazel eyes. She had tied her chestnut hair back with a ribbon, allowing a few curls to frame her face. Willoughby consisted primarily of one main street with wooden buildings lining both sides. A church stood at one end, its white steeple the tallest structure in town. People moved about on their daily business, stopping to greet Thomas and Mary as they rode in. "The Davies family," called a portly man from the doorway of the general store. "And this must be the niece I've heard so much about." Introductions were made to Mr. Hollister, the storekeeper, and his wife. They were the first of many as Thomas proudly presented Willow to what seemed like every resident of Willoughby over the course of the morning. While Mary attended to her shopping, Thomas took Willow to the bank to introduce her to the manager and set up an account for her with the money she had brought from St. Louis. "It's important you have your own funds," he insisted. "A woman should always have means of her own, especially out here." Willow was touched by his thoughtfulness. Her father had raised her to understand finances, unusual though that was for young ladies of her background, and she appreciated that her uncle respected her independence. As they exited the bank, Willow spotted a familiar figure across the street: Isaac, leading his black gelding toward the blacksmith's shop. Without thinking, she raised a hand in greeting. He saw her and nodded, a slight smile lifting the corner of his mouth. "Go on over if you'd like," Thomas said, noticing the exchange. "I need to speak with Sheriff Miller anyway. Meet me at Hollister's store in half an hour." With her uncle's permission, Willow crossed the muddy street, carefully lifting her skirts to avoid the worst of it. Isaac waited for her, his expression unreadable. "Miss Davies," he greeted her. "Town suits you." Willow laughed. "Does it? I feel rather out of place still. Everyone knows everyone else's business here." "That they do," he agreed. "It's the blessing and curse of small towns." He gestured to his horse. "Just bringing Thunder in for new shoes. Care to walk with me?" They strolled toward the blacksmith's shop, Isaac shortening his long stride to match hers. Several townspeople watched them with undisguised curiosity. "I believe we're providing today's entertainment," Willow murmured, nodding toward a group of women who quickly looked away when she caught them staring. Isaac chuckled. "The mysterious Emerson walking with the beautiful newcomer from the city? They'll be talking about it for weeks." The casual compliment brought a flush to Willow's cheeks, but before she could respond, they reached the blacksmith's. A burly man with enormous arms and a leather apron emerged from the shop, wiping his hands on a rag. "Emerson, right on time. And with company, I see. Jacob, this is Miss Willow Davies, Thomas's niece," Isaac introduced her. "Miss Davies, Jacob Miller is the finest blacksmith in Colorado Territory." "Only blacksmith for 20 miles, Jacob corrected with a laugh. "But I'll take the compliment." He bowed slightly to Willow. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Davies. Your uncle's a good man." While Jacob examined Thunder's hooves, Isaac and Willow stood to the side, continuing their conversation. "How are you finding ranch life?" Isaac asked. "Different from St. Louis, I imagine." Willow nodded. "Very different, but in good ways mostly. I'm learning something new every day. Yesterday, Aunt Mary taught me to make soap from rendered fat and lye." She held up her hands, showing a small burn on one finger. "I wasn't entirely successful." Isaac took her hand without thinking, examining the minor injury. His touch was gentle, and Willow felt a strange flutter in her chest at the contact. "You should put some comfort salve on that," he said, releasing her hand almost reluctantly. "I can bring some by the ranch. I make it myself from plants I gather." "You know about medicinal plants?" Willow asked, surprised. A shadow crossed Isaac's face. "Picked up a few things during the war. When supplies ran low, we had to make do with what nature provided." Before Willow could respond, Jacob called Isaac over to discuss Thunder's shoes. She watched as the two men conversed, noting how Isaac's stance relaxed slightly as they spoke of practical matters. There was so much she didn't know about this quiet, self-contained man, but she found herself wanting to learn more. The intensity of this feeling surprised her. She had known several eligible men in St. Louis, had even received 2 marriage proposals before her 22nd birthday, but none had intrigued her the way Isaac Emerson did after just a few brief encounters. When it was time to meet her uncle, Isaac walked her back to the general store. "Will you join us for dinner at the hotel?" Willow asked impulsively as they approached. "Uncle Thomas mentioned he planned to treat us." Isaac hesitated. "I should get back to my cabin before dark." "Please," she pressed, "as a thank you for rescuing me that day." Something in her expression must have convinced him, for he nodded slowly. "All right, I'll meet you at the hotel at 6. Willow couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. "We'll look forward to it." The remainder of the afternoon passed quickly as Willow helped Mary select fabrics for new curtains and a dress for herself. Thomas insisted on buying her a new bonnet, saying her city hat wasn't practical for ranch life. "The sun's stronger out here," he explained. "You'll burn that fair skin of yours without proper covering." By the time they arrived at the hotel dining room that evening, Willow found herself anticipating Isaac's arrival with a nervousness that she hadn't felt since her first society ball. He arrived precisely at 6, having clearly made an effort with his appearance. His dark hair was combed neatly, and he wore a clean shirt under his usual vest. He had trimmed his beard somewhat, and Willow noticed for the first time the strong line of his jaw. Dinner was a pleasant affair, with Thomas regaling them with stories of his early days in Colorado Territory. Isaac contributed occasionally, and Willow was pleased to see him smile more frequently as the meal progressed. "Did I ever tell you about the time Ike here saved my best stallion?" Thomas asked, pouring more coffee for everyone. Blizzard of 75, worse than the one you arrived in, Willow. Somehow, that fool horse broke out of the barn and went missing. Ike tracked him for 2 days in waist-deep snow, found him half-frozen in a ravine, and somehow got him back to the ranch. Isaac shook his head. You make it sound more heroic than it was. That horse was worth a small fortune. Made economic sense to find him. Always downplaying things, Thomas said to Willow with a wink. Truth is, Ike risked his life for that animal. Could have frozen to death himself. As the evening drew to a close, Thomas insisted on paying for Isaac's meal despite his protests. Outside the hotel, they prepared to part ways, the Davies family to spend the night at the hotel before returning to the ranch in the morning, and Isaac to begin his journey back to his cabin. Thank you for joining us, Willow said as they stood on the hotel porch. It was a lovely evening. Isaac nodded. It was. He hesitated, then added, I'm heading to Denver next week to sell some pelts. I'll be gone about 2 weeks, just so you know. Willow felt a twinge of disappointment at the thought of not seeing him for so long but managed to smile. Safe travels, then. Good night, Miss Davies, he said, touching the brim of his hat before turning to leave. As she watched him walk away, Willow realized with sudden clarity that she had begun to care for Isaac Emerson far more than she had intended to. The next 2 weeks passed slowly for Willow, filled with ranch work and domestic duties. She threw herself into learning everything she could, determined to become useful to her aunt and uncle. Mary taught her to churn butter, preserve vegetables, and bake the sourdough bread that was a staple of their meals. Thomas showed her how to mend fences, care for the horses, and even shoot a rifle just in case, he said, though the territory was generally peaceful these days. She found herself watching the trail that led to town, hoping for a glimpse of a rider that might be Isaac returning from Denver. Mary noticed but said nothing, merely exchanging knowing glances with Thomas when they thought Willow wasn't looking. It was 16 days after their dinner in town when Willow, hanging laundry on the line behind the house, spotted a familiar figure riding toward the ranch. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized Isaac's straight-backed posture and black gelding. Trying to appear casual, she continued with her chore, though her hands trembled slightly as she pinned a sheet to the line. By the time Isaac reached the yard, she had composed herself, or so she thought. Afternoon, Miss Davies, he called, dismounting with his usual grace. Is Thomas around? In the barn, I believe, she replied, shielding her eyes from the sun as she looked up at him. How was Denver? Isaac approached, leading thunder. Busy, growing fast. He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. I brought you something. Surprised, Willow accepted the package, their fingers brushing in the exchange. For me? You shouldn't have. It's nothing fancy, he said, looking almost embarrassed. Just saw it and thought of you. Willow unwrapped the paper to find a small book of poetry Wordsworth, one of her favorites. The binding was simple but elegant, the pages clean and crisp. Isaac, she breathed, using his full name for the first time. This is lovely. How did you know I enjoy poetry? He shifted his weight, suddenly looking boyish despite his weathered face. You mentioned it that day on the trail to your uncle's. Said your mother used to read it to you. The fact that he had remembered such a small detail from their conversation touched Willow deeply. Thank you. I shall treasure it. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Isaac cleared his throat. I should find Thomas. Business to discuss. Willow nodded, clutching the book to her chest. Of course. Will you stay for dinner? If I'm invited. Always, she said softly. As Isaac led his horse toward the barn, Willow watched him go, the book of poetry warm in her hands. Something had changed between them, something subtle but significant. Over the next month, Isaac visited the Davies ranch more frequently than before. Sometimes he brought small gifts, comfort sal for Willow's hands, chapped from ranch work, wild honey from a hive he had discovered, a delicate wooden carving of a horse that he claimed was just something to pass the time, but showed remarkable skill. Each visit deepened the connection between them, though neither spoke openly of feelings. They rode together sometimes, Isaac showing Willow his favorite spots in the nearby hills, a hidden meadow that bloomed with wildflowers in spring, a clear stream where trout could be caught with patience, a high overlook where the vastness of the territory spread before them like a painting. It was on one such ride in late February, with winter still holding the land in its grip but hints of the coming spring in the air, that something shifted again. They had stopped at the overlook, dismounting to stretch their legs. The day was unusually mild for the season, the sun warming the air enough that they could remove their heavy coats. "It's beautiful," Willow said, gazing out at the landscape. "I never imagined I would love it here so much." Isaac stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "It grows on you. Took me a while to see past the hardships to the beauty." "Is that why you stayed?" "For the beauty." He was quiet for a long moment. "Partly. After the war, I couldn't go back east. Too many memories. Too much loss." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious. "Out here I found peace. Space to breathe again." Willow nodded, understanding. "My parents' deaths left me feeling similarly. St. Louis became a city of ghosts for me." "And now," Isaac asked softly, "have you found peace here?" She met his gaze steadily. "I've found more than I expected to." The meaning behind her words hung in the air between them. Isaac took a step closer, then hesitated, uncertainty crossing his features. "Willow," he began, using her first name deliberately. "I'm not a man of many words, and I'm certainly not the kind of gentleman you probably knew in St. Louis. I live simply, and I don't have much to offer a woman like you." "A woman like me?" she questioned, heart pounding. "Educated, refined, beautiful." He said the last word almost reverently. "You could have your pick of men even out here. Men with proper homes and businesses. Not a trapper's cabin and an uncertain future." Willow took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Perhaps you should let me decide what kind of man I prefer." Isaac Emerson. Something flared in his eyes, hope, mixed with disbelief. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying," she interrupted, "that I have come to care for you a great deal, and if you feel similarly, then perhaps we should explore what that might mean." For a moment, Isaac stood perfectly still, processing her words. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached for her hand. His calloused fingers entwined with hers, the touch sending a shiver up her arm despite the warmth of the day. "I've cared for you since the moment I caught your horse's bridle," he admitted quietly. "But I never thought." Willow squeezed his hand. "Well, now you know." They stood together at the overlook, hands linked, neither speaking for a time. The moment felt fragile, new, full of possibility. Finally, Isaac turned to face her fully. "May I call on you properly?" "With your uncle's permission." Willow smiled, touched by his old-fashioned propriety. "I would like that very much." The ride back to the ranch was filled with a new awareness between them. Nothing had been declared outright, no promises made beyond Isaac's intention to speak with Thomas, but everything had changed nonetheless. Thomas received Isaac's request to court his niece with a mixture of satisfaction and protective concern. "You're a good man, Ike," he said as they sat in his study that evening, Willow and Mary giving them privacy for this important conversation. "But Willow's been through a lot. I won't see her hurt." "Nor would I ever wish to hurt her," Isaac replied earnestly. "I know I'm not what her parents would have chosen for her." "Don't be so sure," Thomas interrupted. My brother valued character above all else. He would have seen yours. He leaned forward, his expression serious. But I need to know your intentions. Willow isn't a woman to trifle with. Isaac met the older man's gaze squarely. My intentions are honorable. I care for her deeply. If, in time, she would consent to be my wife, I would consider myself the most fortunate of men. Thomas studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. You have my permission to court her. A smile broke through his serious expression. Though I suspect you already had hers. And so began a courtship unlike anything Willow had experienced in St. Louis. There were no formal balls or chaperoned walks in manicured parks. Instead, there were long rides across the Colorado landscape, dinners with Thomas and Mary, and occasional trips to town where Isaac would buy her small tokens of his affection, a ribbon for her hair, a journal for her thoughts, once a pair of gloves lined with rabbit fur that he had trapped and prepared himself. Spring arrived, transforming the landscape. The meadow Isaac had shown Willow bloomed with wildflowers as promised, and he took her there for a picnic one warm April day. They sat on a blanket among the bluebells and Indian paintbrush, the mountains still snow-capped in the distance. I've been thinking, Isaac said as they finished the simple meal Mary had packed for them. My cabin is too small for more than one person, really? Willow looked at him curiously. Oh, he nodded, suddenly looking nervous. I've purchased some land, just west of your uncle's property. 10 acres with good water access. The papers came through last week. Isaac, that's wonderful, Willow exclaimed. Is that what you've been discussing with Uncle Thomas lately? Partly, he admitted. I've been saving for years, just waiting for the right opportunity. He took her hand. I'm going to build a house there. Nothing grand, but solid. Room to grow. The implication of his words made Willow's heart race. Room to grow. Isaac met her eyes, the blue of his irises intense in the spring sunlight. Willow Davies, I love you. I think I've loved you since that winter day when I found you on the trail. I know it hasn't been very long, and if you need more time, I understand. But I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up each morning to your smile and go to sleep each night with your hand in mine. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a ring, simple but beautiful, with a single pearl set in silver. It was my mother's, he explained. The only thing of hers I still have. Will you marry me, Willow? Will you make a home with me on that land? Tears filled Willow's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man holding it. In the months since their first meeting, she had come to know Isaac Emerson as a man of quiet strength, unwavering integrity, and gentle heart. He had shown her a different kind of life than the one she had known in St. Louis, harder in some ways, but richer in others, filled with an honesty and directness she had come to treasure. Yes, she whispered, then more firmly, yes, Isaac, I will marry you. His face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. When he leaned forward to kiss her, it was their first kiss, tender and sweet, a promise of all that was to come. They were married in June, with wildflowers decorating the small church in Willoughby. Mary had helped Willow sew a wedding dress of cream-colored silk that Thomas had ordered specially from Denver. Isaac wore a new suit, looking handsome but slightly uncomfortable in the formal attire. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with Thomas giving his niece away and the entire community of Willoughby in attendance. Even the weather cooperated, providing a perfect blue sky and gentle breeze. While their house was being built, Isaac working alongside the hired carpenters every day, the newlyweds lived in a small cabin on Thomas's property. Those first weeks of marriage were a time of discovery for both of them, learning each other's habits and rhythms, finding ways to blend their separate lives into one shared existence. Willow learned that Isaac sang softly to himself when he thought no one was listening, old songs from his childhood in Pennsylvania. He discovered that she talked in her sleep occasionally, usually about books she had read or people she had known in St. Louis. They worked hard during the day, Isaac on their house and helping with ranch work, Willow assisting Mary and tending to their temporary home. The evenings were their own, spent reading aloud from Willow's growing collection of books, playing checkers, which Isaac usually won, or simply sitting together on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Colorado sky. By September, their house was ready for occupancy, a sturdy structure of wood and stone with 4 rooms downstairs and 2 upstairs. It was simple compared to the home Willow had grown up in, but to her it was perfect. Isaac had built bookshelves along one wall of the main room, knowing how she treasured her books. The kitchen had a large window that looked out toward the mountains, and the bedroom faced east to catch the morning sun. "What do you think?" Isaac asked anxiously as they stood in the completed house for the first time. "I know it's not fancy," Willow silenced him with a kiss. "It's our home, Isaac. I love every inch of it." That fall, they established their routines on their own land. Isaac continued to trap in the nearby hills but also began raising horses, his skill with the animals bringing buyers from as far as Denver. Willow planted a garden, kept chickens, and began teaching at the small schoolhouse in Willoughby 2 days a week when the regular teacher fell ill and couldn't continue. Winter came again, bringing with it the anniversary of their first meeting. On a cold December morning, with snow falling gently outside their window, Willow placed Isaac's hand on her stomach, watching his face as understanding dawned. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice hushed with wonder. She nodded, her eyes shining. "Dr. Matthews confirmed it yesterday when I was in town. We're going to have a baby, Isaac. In late June, he thinks." Isaac gathered her into his arms, holding her as though she were made of precious glass. "A baby?" he repeated, awe in his voice. "Our baby." As they stood together by the window, watching the snow transform their land into a winter wonderland, Willow thought of how much had changed in just 1 year. From the frightened young woman whose horse had slipped on the ice to the confident wife and soon-to-be mother she was now, it seemed both a lifetime and merely a moment. "It's over, you're all right," Isaac had told her that day. Simple words that had turned out to be prophetic. The painful chapter of her life that had begun with her parents' deaths was indeed over, and she was more than all right. She was loved. She was home. The winter passed peacefully, with Isaac becoming increasingly protective as Willow's pregnancy progressed. He insisted on accompanying her to town for her teaching days, worried about her traveling alone in the cold. He built a cradle for the baby, carving delicate patterns of leaves and flowers into the wood. Spring came early that year, bringing a riot of wildflowers to their land. Willow, her belly now prominently rounded, spent hours in the garden, preparing for the summer harvests. Isaac expanded their small herd of horses, including a gentle mare he insisted would be perfect for their child to ride someday. "Not for years yet," Willow reminded him with a laugh as he described his plans for teaching their child to ride. "I'm planning ahead," he replied with a grin, placing his hand on her stomach just in time to feel a strong kick. Strong legs, a natural rider already. In late June, just as Dr. Matthews had predicted, Willow went into labor as the sun was setting over the mountains. Mary came to assist, having been through childbirth herself and helped many women in the area. Isaac paced outside their bedroom, alternating between worry when he heard Willow's cries and overwhelming love when Mary would emerge periodically to assure him that everything was progressing normally. "First babies take time," Mary told him gently. "She's strong, Ike. Have faith." As dawn broke over the eastern horizon, sending golden light through the bedroom window, Isabella Davies Emerson entered the world with a lusty cry that instantly became the most beautiful sound her father had ever heard. When Mary placed the swaddled infant in his arms, Isaac felt tears streaming down his face, tears of joy, relief, an overwhelming love for this tiny being and the woman who had brought her into the world. "She's perfect," he whispered, carefully carrying his daughter to Willow's bedside. Willow, exhausted but radiant, reached for their child. "She has your eyes," she noted, studying the baby's face. "They're so blue." "And your strength," Isaac replied, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "I heard her first cry from the hallway. Lung power like her mother when she's arguing a point." Willow laughed, then winced slightly at the movement. "We should name her after your mother, as we discussed." Isaac nodded, touched by the suggestion. "Isabella. It suits her." As the new family sat together in the morning light, the world outside continuing its daily rhythm, Isaac reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance encounter on an icy trail to this a home, a wife he adored, and now a daughter who already held his heart in her tiny hands. "I love you," he told Willow, leaning forward to kiss her forehead. "Both of you, more than I can ever express." Willow smiled up at him, tired but content. "We love you too, always." The years that followed brought changes and growth to the Emerson family and their land. Isaac's horse breeding business thrived, with buyers coming from as far as California for his well-trained mounts. Willow continued teaching part-time at the schoolhouse, taking Isabella with her when she was old enough. Their family grew again 2 years after Isabella's birth with the arrival of a son, Thomas Isaac Emerson, named for Willow's uncle who had brought them together. The elder Thomas was moved to tears when they told him of their choice. "Never thought I'd have a namesake," he said gruffly, holding the infant with surprising gentleness. "He has the Emerson look about him, but those are Davies' eyes, mark my words." The town of Willoughby grew as well, with a proper doctor's office established, a second general store opening, and even a small library that Willow helped organize. The railroad came through a neighboring town, bringing increased trade and new settlers to the area. Through it all, Isaac and Willow's love deepened and matured. The passion of their early days mellowed into something equally powerful, but more enduring, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared goals, and unwavering support. They faced challenges together: a drought that threatened their crops and pastures one summer, a winter so severe it claimed 2 of their best horses despite their best efforts, a scarlet fever outbreak in town that thankfully spared their children but took several of their neighbors. Each trial seemed to strengthen their bond rather than weaken it. Isaac often marveled at how Willow had adapted to Western life, her city upbringing now just a distant part of her history. She, in turn, admired how he had opened his solitary existence to include not just her but their children and the wider community. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Willow with a trip to Denver, their first journey away from the children, who stayed with Thomas and Mary. The city had grown enormously in the decades since Willow had arrived in Colorado, with paved streets, electric lights, and amenities that reminded her somewhat of St. Louis. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate at restaurants, attended a theatrical performance, and browsed bookshops where Isaac insisted she select as many volumes as she wished for their growing home library. "Are you happy, Willow?" he asked as they lay in the hotel bed on their final night in Denver. "With the life we've built?" She turned to face him, studying the face that had become as familiar to her as her own, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper now, silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, but the same steady blue gaze that had calmed her on that icy trail so many years ago. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" He gathered her close, his strong arms as reassuring as they had always been. "I was a half-man before I met you, just existing. You taught me to live again, to love again. You and the children, you're everything to me." When they returned home, their children racing to greet them with excited tales of their time with Great Uncle Thomas and Great Aunt Mary, Both Isaac and Willow felt renewed appreciation for the life they had created together. Isabella, now 9, was becoming a skilled writer under her father's tutelage and showed a love for books that matched her mother's. Thomas, at 7, was more interested in the practical aspects of ranch life, following Isaac around as he tended the horses and repaired fences. "Papa, did you bring me anything from Denver?" Thomas asked, hopping from one foot to the other in excitement. "Thomas," Willow admonished gently, "that's not a proper greeting." Isaac laughed, swinging his son up onto his shoulders. "It's all right. And yes, young man, I did bring you something. Both of you." He nodded to Isabella. "But first, tell me how the new filly is doing. Has she taken to the halter yet?" As the children chattered about the events of their absence, Willow stood back, drinking in the scene. Her family, her home, all stemming from that moment on the trail when her horse had slipped on the ice and a quiet cowboy had caught the bridle, steadying her with his strength and his reassuring words. "It's over, you're all right," he had said. And she truly was. As the seasons continued to turn, the Emerson family thrived on their land. Isabella grew into a poised young woman with her father's quiet confidence and her mother's love of learning. Thomas became his father's right hand in the horse business, showing a natural talent for working with even the most difficult animals. 2 more children joined the family over the years: Sarah Mary, named for both grandmothers, and Michael James, the youngest and most adventurous of the 4. When Isabella turned 18, she announced her intention to attend the Teachers College in Denver, following in her mother's footsteps. Though Isaac worried about his daughter being so far from home, he supported her decision, knowing that Willow's influence had given their children wings while ensuring they would always want to return to the nest. "She'll come back," Willow assured him as they watched the train carry Isabella away for her first term. "This land is in her blood now, just as it's in ours." And she did return, bringing with her new ideas for the local school and, eventually, a young doctor who had been assigned to Denver from back east. When Isabella married him 2 years later, the ceremony was held on Emerson land, under the same blue Colorado sky that had witnessed her parents' courtship. Thomas took over more of the horse business as Isaac's joints began to trouble him after years of hard work in all weather. The partnership between father and son was seamless, built on mutual respect and shared vision. Willow continued to teach until Sarah was old enough to take her place at the schoolhouse. Then she turned her attention to a new project writing down the history of the area, collecting stories from the oldest residents and creating a record that would survive long after they were gone. "Your words will outlive us all," Isaac told her proudly as he read her careful chronicles. "Future generations will know what it was like here, because of you." As they entered their later years, Isaac and Willow watched their children establish their own homes and families. Sunday dinners at the original Emerson house became a tradition, with grandchildren racing across the same meadows where Isaac and Willow had once picnicked as a courting couple. On cold winter evenings, when their bones ached with the memory of years of physical labor, they would sit by the fire in the house Isaac had built, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes reminiscing about the life they had shared. "Do you ever regret it?" Isaac asked one such evening, as snow fell outside their window much as it had the day they met. "Staying here instead of returning to city life? You could have had an easier path." Willow, her chestnut hair now streaked with silver but her hazel eyes as bright as ever, took his weathered hand in hers. "Not for a single moment. This life, our life, has been richer and more meaningful than anything I could have found in St. Louis." Isaac smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "Remember that day on the trail? Your horse slipping on the ice?" "How could I forget?" she replied softly. "The day my life truly began." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "I told you it was over, that you were all right, and I was," Willow said, leaning against his shoulder. I am. Outside, the snow continued to fall on the land they had tended and loved for over 30 years. Inside, warmed by fire and memory and abiding love, Isaac and Willow Emerson sat together, their journey from strangers to soulmates complete but continuing still. Every day a new page in their enduring story, a story that had begun with a slip on the ice, a steady hand on a bridle, and words of comfort that had proven prophetic. It was over the loneliness, the uncertainty, the feeling of being adrift. And they were all right, more than all right. They were home.